Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. It is great to have everybody here. I'm going to take it a little bit slow in introducing my guests, mostly because we've got only a few people here so far, and I know that some people aren't here because the commercial is playing and they won't be here until the commercial is done. So when we get a few more people in, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my guests so that not too many people miss out on that portion. And while we are waiting for a few more, let's go ahead and say hello to people who are in the chat. Taram is here. It's always good to see you, Taram. Ted Franks is here. Welcome, Ted Franks. Harmonica Man is here, and Eric Mishima is here. That's who I can see, and I know Sandy is lurking. Sandy is somewhere in the background, so hello and welcome. Today, because the discussion is something that is going to involve theism, I have specifically invited a few theists into the chat. I don't know that any of them will actually come, but if they do, I do welcome their questions. I know that some of the theists that I invited will find Calvinism to be as repulsive as I do. And I also know that a couple of the people that I invited are in fact Calvinists. Oh, Jenny Morgan is here. Hello, Jenny Morgan. Thank you for coming too. And guest today, I have with me Jim Hall, Atheist Edge.
Oh, I was muted. Sorry. Hello.
That's okay. And I have Lone Wanderer.
Hello.
And Lisa for Truth.
Hello.
And I'm going to let each of you take just a few minutes to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and where people can find you. And if you don't need to take notes, because there are links to everybody's channels in the description. So after the show, if you want to look anybody up and subscribe to their channel, the links are there. Jim, let's go ahead and let you go first and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, Jim Hall. I'm one half of Atheist Edge. I'm co-host with Courtney Stewart. We've been around a little over 4 years. We're currently working on, we're at the tail end of a 7-part series on Richard Carrier's critical thinking course. After that's done, we're planning a longish series on comparisons between the book of Jonah and Jason and the Argonauts, epic Greek myths. And we're going to show how whoever wrote the book of Jonah was a plagiarist. So we got that going. And Courtney and I will both be at Faithless Forum in Austin, passing out swag and maybe getting some interviews and talking to people and catching the talks down there. And that's November, I think, 18 to 20th. That's what we got going on.
Okay, very good. Junk Shop Library is here. Junk Shop, long time no see. Great to have you. Phony Beetle Maniacs is here and has a comment here that I do want to get to, but it's going to be a while. But Phony Beetle Maniacs, we will get to that comment in a bit when after everyone's had a chance to introduce, we've had a chance to talk just a bit. And Skits Crasher is here as well. Okay, Lone Wanderer, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, it's me, the Lone Wanderer. I have a YouTube channel, but I haven't put any content out in quite a while because I'm wanting to get a new camera, so things will look better, and trying to get into some RPGing of my post-apocalyptic universe, which I have created. And I'm self-employed. I work as an editor and proofreader, and I live in Louisiana. I don't care. People know where I am now. I'm not really doxing myself. Louisiana's big. And that's me.
Very good. Lisa, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Lisa for Truth. I run the YouTube channel Lisa for Truth. It started out as a religion channel, religion in general, but lately I've been exposing the truth behind Christianity, and it seems that not a whole lot of Christians like that. I mean, they're like, that's not what we do. And I'm like, you know what? You may not do it now, but you did, and, plus, we were talking before the show, if Christianity is true, why are there thousands of denominations? So,
Okay.
I mean, so that's who I am.
Okay.
I also do Saturday live streams on Saturday and Atheist Church on Sunday.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Lisa. You might have noticed, if you are a regular viewer, that the thumbnail for today's show looks somewhat like the shows that I have done for Why Are We Here? And originally this was supposed to be an episode of Why Are We Here? But I've noticed in the last 3 months that the viewership for that show has been dropping significantly. And I also realized when I look back on it that I've really wasted the opportunity that I've had with some of my guests. For example, I had Seth Andrews on, and we just talked about what we do and why we do it. And instead of digging into his mind and getting some things that I could have gotten that are really valuable for the community, like how to better the conversation, I think that would have been a much better topic to talk about. And so what I've decided to do is keep doing this type of show where I'm trying to get one fairly famous guest. Jim Hall is my famous guest today, and two guests that not as many people know about. And so we can kind of, bridge that, but at the same time, get a topic out there that's going to be interesting for the audience and is going to draw in a decent audience. And the idea for this show came because last week I was on Atheist Edge's show, and he had a conversation with 3 theists and 3 atheists. And one of the theists was a Calvinist. And I've taken some clips from that show for us for today. And I'm going to show you the very beginning of the show when, the Calvinist is Will, and he was a substitute at the last minute. So I did not know he was coming. And once we knew his name, I had no idea that he was a Calvinist. But this was my reaction when I found out that Will was a Calvinist.
Starter was... now it's primarily with the Catholics, the whole idea of original sin. I think the Catholics really blow that.
Just a minute. This is already too far. There, let's try this again.
Like when Will was talking about Reformed Calvinist, man, I've got so many questions about that. We could start right there if we want.
There you go. That was
I didn't notice that
reaction.
originally.
When
good.
I found out that Will was a Calvinist.
That face. Oh my God.
I should have picked up on that nonverbal cue that you actually knew something about it.
Yeah. I was not raised in any religion. Well, not really. My parents were Catholic when I was very young. They left the Catholic Church when I was 7. But having a husband that was in the Army for 13 years, we moved around a lot. We went to a lot of different denominations, and we ended up landing in Fort Wayne, Indiana for over 20 years. And while we were there, a friend of mine invited me to a Calvinist church, and I went with her, and I thought that the Calvinist church was much more an intellectual faith. And I found it that way because they studied so deeply. And I think that is one of the major draws of Calvinism is the pseudo-intellectualism. The leaders of the faith make it sound like they know a lot. And they do. I mean, they've studied the word, they've studied the Greek, they've studied the Hebrew, they've studied the history. And so they tell you all these things, and it sounds like it is so intellectual that you feel like, wow, I'm really learning so much. I'm really getting close to God. And it's not unless you really think more skeptically and step back from it that you realize that there's a lot of really weird stuff in that doctrine. And Calvinism has basically 5 points to it, which we call the Tulip Doctrine. And the first point of Calvinism is total depravity, which is what Jim was talking about with original sin. So, Jim, when you were introducing the topic and you were saying that original sin was a Catholic idea, I was thinking, it's not limited to Catholic.
That kind of makes sense because, just researching for this show, I found out that Calvinism, next to Lutheranism, is the oldest Protestant denomination. So it was one of the original splinters from the Catholic Church.
That makes sense why it would have retained that. Yeah. And so, yeah, the total depravity, the T in the tulip, is definitely one of the Calvinist doctrines. So let's go ahead and listen to where Jim introduces that.
Starter was now it's primarily with the Catholics, the whole idea of the original sin. I think the Catholics really blow that. They place more importance on that. Why was Jesus sent to earth? To cleanse us from with his blood, those sins, that original brokenness that never actually took place in the first place.
Jim, I think starting out, I think that there might be one slight tweak to that from a Christian perspective, probably most even Catholic perspective there. So I think that Jesus came to pay the price for the sins of humanity, for each individual's own choices that they've made, and those things that God would count as sin. Now, I believe the Bible teaches that all sin comes from unbelief. It's not the actions. That's how I was kind of raised, where what you do and what you don't do equals the sin. But when you look at the grander story and the writings of prophets and the Apostle Paul in the epistles, you realize that sin is actually believing false things about God and what he says, and what he says is true of us. I think Jesus came to pay the penalty for that, to exchange his life, his perfect life, the life of perfect belief in the Father, and for ours, not just Adam's. I also might have a non-traditional Christian understanding of original sin as well, but I'll let someone else speak here.
Anyone else?
Oop. Okay.
Right off the
I thought I
bat,
had Will's response to that, but evidently I've got a little
Caesar's
pause.
entire base philosophy on sin and the origins, the nature of sin, is totally antithetical to Will's right off the bat. And you guys will see, I don't want to steal any thunder, but you guys are going to see throughout this. In fact, at one point, I told Kelly, us atheists, we can just go ahead and leave the room, because they were busy arguing with each other the entire time.
Yeah. I want to bring up this comment from Phony Beetle Maniacs. John Calvin's institutes are not repulsive. Some people get the wrong end of the stick. And that is exactly what eventually took me away from Calvinism, is because when you think about the Calvinist doctrine, it from a God point of view, and that's the only way you can look at it, and it looks like it makes sense and it looks like it's a good thing, is thinking, okay, I'm making much of God. I'm putting my total focus on God. But part of the problem with that is that if you aren't one of the chosen of God, then too bad, no God for you. Lisa or Lone Wanderer, did either of you have a comment before we get to the next clip?
Yeah, I just don't know how you can get the wrong end of the stick. It's pretty blunt, And I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead with your clips, so I'll wait until it comes up.
Okay.
So total depravity, I think, is probably the most repulsive of the 5 points of Calvinism. Not that the others aren't repulsive, but that, you're born in sin. You can't do anything about it. You're totally dependent on God, and which in all actuality makes you dependent on the church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a control mechanism.
Harmonica Man, that's galvanized, not Calvinized.
That's exactly what it is. It's a control mechanism. The entire idea of sin is a control mechanism. You need the church to get to God, basically, is what the sin concept is all about. And I'm not just talking about the Catholic Church either. I'm talking about all Christian churches. For the most part.
Before you move on to the next clip, just clarify one thing for me. Now, with Caesar and Will, a lot of the time, what they were arguing, I was trying to get to get them to a fact claim that either Adam and Eve literally happened in actual history, and then that was the original cause of man's sinful nature, or was it baked in from the very beginning? So a Calvinist, what I guess learned, correct me if I'm wrong, that Will totally believes in Adam and Eve, that it actually happened, and that is the cause of the like. If it weren't for them screwing up and eating from the fruit from the tree, we would have been fine. And Caesar is totally the opposite. Humans were created with a sinful nature from the get-go.
You're most of the way there, but not quite. And this is one of the arguments that I have with a number of Calvinists. And this is why I say I felt that Will was brave, and I felt that Will really owns his own faith, which a lot of Calvinists don't do. Because one of the points of Calvinism is that God is completely sovereign. He is totally in control of everything, which means that not only, yes, God, when Adam and Eve sinned, that was the original sin, but God planned for Adam and Eve to sin. He intended for Adam and Eve to sin. And the reason he intended that was because God's whole purpose in life is to display his glory. And part of the manifestation of God is God's justice and God's mercy. And God cannot display his justice if there's no sin for him to punish. So he intended for Adam and Eve to eat the apple, to sin, so that he could display his justice. And then he intended for Christ to come so he could display his mercy.
That's making up a problem to sell a cure.
Exactly. And the thing that I find the most repulsive about the theology is that the Bible also tells us that few people will find this. And Calvinists will readily admit that people who are saved is a small minority of people. So why does God need so many vessels of wrath and only a few vessels for glory? Yeah, that just makes no sense. So moving on to the next clip.
Here, you are alive. There is suffering in the world for everyone. There's no partiality, right? Believers suffer just as much as unbelievers do, right? Believers don't get to not suffer simply because there is no part. God shows no partiality other than salvation, right? Those whom he have chosen and those who he has not. So when we live out our daily life, we all get sick, we all get hurt, we all suffer, we all have bad things happen to us.
I'm going to halt him just for that, because these aren't in quite the order that I was thinking. That Will is talking about partiality, and the reason he's talking about that is he had made the statement just shortly before this that God does not show favoritism, and he is making the claim that God does not show any partiality, but his back for that is Calvinists say that there's two types of grace. There's special grace and there's general grace. And general grace is like, the rain falls on the just and the unjust. And that's what he's talking about here, that, everybody experiences the same kind of pain and suffering. That's the general grace of God.
Fully.
And
right?
You just admitted a contradiction in the Bible between you and your theology.
Also.
You just admitted that God has no partiality except when it comes to salvation, but your Bible says otherwise.
No, it's not. It's partiality.
That's what you just said.
No, that's not what I said. You're confusing partiality based on my merit, right? The elect are chosen not by anything they've done.
That's still partiality.
No, it's not partiality.
Whether it's done on the basis of merit or on the basis of randomness, it's still partiality.
What does partiality say?
If I take 1,000 marbles and I choose 5 of them at random, and then I decide that I am going to, show some kind of love and affection to these 5 and not to the others, I'm showing partiality.
It does show love and affection. That's what I just said. I just got my whole statement there was we all experience life in the same way. Can you be happy and not be a believer? Can you have a loving wife and kids and enjoy it? Could you not have kids? Could you do have great relationships and whatever?
Partiality.
It's not partiality.
You're showing one level of
choosing one over another is not partiality.
Then what is
partiality?
partiality?
Can I say something? Can I say something?
It would be
yes.
Will just made a factually wrong statement.
Oh yeah.
I mean, let's not even go into theology right now, but factually wrong, because everybody does not experience life in the same way. I mean, come on, that's why we're people. That's why we're individuals. You know? So, I
I
mean,
think
right off the bat, he's wrong.
to steal man will, I think what he's trying to say is we all have the opportunity for a great life. What he's failing to understand is what Kelly was trying to explain to him, is that if you've been written into the book of life, God exhibited partiality when he wrote you into the book of life, and you get the afterlife, and you get to live in his presence. And only a tiny percentage of people that are ever born get that. So that is indeed partiality, right?
Right.
Exactly.
He was trying to explain that there's no partiality because of general grace, but what he was missing is that the special grace, there's no question about that. And one thing I didn't think about until the next day, I often think of things later, is I should have brought up Mary. You know, when the angel appeared to Mary, what did he say to her? Hail, favored one. I mean, if that's not partiality, I don't know what is.
And the Jews too. I mean, weren't they the chosen peoples, right?
They were the chosen
That's partiality.
people. Yeah.
I don't think he liked the fact that he got caught in a lie. You know, he's like, no, I didn't. I was like, yes, you did. Even if you just look at the dictionary and partiality, he wasn't having it. I was trying not to throw things at the screen when I was watching that. But I'm like, it is partiality.
Okay, we'll finish up the clip on partiality.
In this life here, where you're predestined, partiality would be showing undue favor to one over the other.
Well, how was the five that I chose to show favor to? How was that undue? I mean, how was that due to them? I've shown undue favor to the five because I gave favor to these because I chose them at random. That's an undue favor. They did nothing to merit my favor.
Why did you choose? You just chose them at random.
I just chose them at random.
Partial? That's impartial.
Because I didn't choose the others. I was partial to these, and I was not partial to those. Why can't I make a choice?
If you're making a choice, you're showing partiality. If partiality is chosen, simply choosing. Point. That's not what partiality means.
Well, okay, partiality is making a choice and showing favor to the chosen.
I mean, I have to agree with her. In that framing you use, God is showing a preference.
One issue. Okay.
That's a logical fallacy called the definitional fallacy, I think. I mean, he just got the definition totally wrong.
Yeah,
and you did excellent, but to make it even better, possibly, tell me if this would have been better if you were explaining partiality and you said the reason I chose those five is because they were the red ones, and I prefer red over the other colors. Instead of just saying I chose them at random, that's where he was getting hung up. If you chose them at random, that's why he was saying it was not partial.
Mm-hmm. Part of the reason I intentionally put the randomness in there is because and let's move on to the next point in the 5 points of Calvinism, which is limited atonement, because that comes very much into what we're talking about here. The second point of Calvinism is limited atonement, that Jesus only died for the chosen. He didn't die for those that were not chosen. And the reason that they have that doctrine is because they say that if Jesus had died for everybody, then his death would not be effective except to those that were chosen. And because God is not a failure, in order to be effective, he only intended to die for the chosen. And the reason that the chosen were chosen was completely random. They don't use the word random, but they say that there was no favor. And they mostly point to Romans 9. And the part where it says that before they did anything good or bad, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. And a lot of Christians, just gloss over that verse, but that's a big deal to Calvinists. That's the whole basis of the choice, is that, there was no reason. God just simply chose some and he chose others, and there's no reason for it.
And that's the definition of partiality, which
Mhm.
is what he's not getting.
As long as we're on that, let's go through the rest of the points of Calvinism. Did anybody else want to go on and explain what the I is? I'm sorry, let's see. I'm sorry, we missed the U. I knew we skipped one. We skipped the U, which is unconditional election. But we kind of touched on that a little bit, that unconditional election is that God chooses some for salvation and he chooses most for damnation, although they don't phrase it that way. And that's the part that you can't usually get them to own, is that, part of unconditional election is God chose some people for damnation. And then who would like to talk a little bit about the next point?
Which one are we on? Limited
We're on
atonement?
I.
Oh,
We're on I.
irresistible grace.
Grace, yeah.
It asserts that the saving grace of God is effectually applied to those whom he has determined to save.
Mm-hmm.
It overcomes the resistance to obeying the call of the gospel, bringing them to a saving faith. It means when God sovereignly proposes to save someone, that individual certainly will be saved. That brings me to a question. Maybe you guys help me out. Like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, let's say God, before they were born, tapped them as chosen. So then they go through the life mass murdering, but they're chosen by God before they're born. So do they get a free pass? They murder all, and they still get to go, bask in his presence. And if so, is that a free will thing, or does God make it to where they repent at the very end, at least on their deathbed? And if so, that's a free will argument. That's a free will issue.
Well, unconditional election means exactly that. But Calvinists believe that once saved, always saved. You cannot lose your salvation. So in other words, God chose you from the beginning of the world. And I believe this is a very Pauline thing about Calvinism, is God chose you from the foundation of the world. And if he chose you, you cannot lose your salvation. And it doesn't matter what you do, because you can't fall from his grace in that scenario, which totally makes no sense.
Jim, in answer to your question, the irresistible grace says that if you are chosen, you will not be able to resist when God calls. And it's only a question of when God calls. It is possible that God would let you do all this murdering and then call. But once he calls, you will answer. You will have no choice but to answer.
You have no choice. Therefore, it's
right.
He strips you of your will, of your own individual free will.
Yeah, they don't believe in free will at all.
That's right. He did say that, didn't he?
Yeah, mm-hmm. They're all predestined.
Yeah, we're just automatons. Oh, that makes it even worse.
They don't go quite that far, because what they say is that even though everything is predestined and God has already determined everything you will do, you still have the brain and the ability to, it's almost like you feel like you're making a choice, even though you're not really. You're making the decision on what you want to do. It's just that God's already determined what decision you're going to make, even though you don't realize it. I know that's why at the beginning, when Will said that Calvinism was the most coherent of theology, I started to laugh. I had to hold myself back from laughing, because I think it's one of the most incoherent.
Someone needs to clip that that face. We could make a meme out of that.
Yeah. And
also Calvinists go, quote unquote, soul winning. Well, if God has already decided who he's going to save and who he's not going to save, what is the point of soul winning?
I can answer that. The point is that you don't know who God has chosen and who God has not chosen. And you don't know if God might be using you as a vessel to deliver his call. So maybe you will knock on somebody's door and they will answer the door and they are a chosen, so that when you share the gospel, they will hear God's call through the words that you give, and they will accept Christ as a result. The good thing, and this is one good thing about Calvinism, the Baptist religion, and I guess I shouldn't say Baptist, because some Baptists are Calvinists and others are not, but a lot of the Protestants that do go soul winning, they put it on you that if the person that you're talking to does not accept Christ, that's your fault. You didn't deliver the message well. You didn't go often enough. You didn't reach out to enough people, and these people are going to hell, and it's your fault. At least the Calvinist says, no, it's on God. You're supposed to go out there and you're supposed to be the messenger, but whether they accepted the message or not, that's not on you. That's on God.
I understand what they say their reasoning is. That's not my point. Their reasoning is not coherent, because if God's already chosen somebody, they're gonna come to God whether or not a person goes soul winning or not. So that's not even coherent. Why would you go soul winning if this chosen person is going to come to God whether you go soul winning or not?
You can make the same argument for prayer. Why pray for anything when what you pray for isn't going to make any change in what God's going to do? God's going to do the same thing whether you pray or whether you don't pray. And so the prayer really isn't for God's benefit, it's for your benefit. And same with the soul winning. It's a matter of being obedient to God and being open to doing whatever God might lead you to do. But are you accomplishing anything? No, not really. Lisa brought up the last point on Calvinism, the P for preservation of the saints, that the Calvinists do believe that once you are saved, you are always saved. It is impossible to walk away from the Calvinist faith, which is why whenever I run into Calvinists, they almost always tell me that I was never a believer. That, it's that 42 years that I followed God, and I was church librarian. I sang in the choir. I went on mission trips. I taught Sunday school. I taught women's Bible study. I even helped found a church. All of that was all for naught because God never chose me in the first place.
Yeah, that kind of grates me. Like, you never were a real Christian to begin with. That is one of the worst straw men I've ever heard in my entire life.
I've heard theists using the no true Scotsman fallacy a lot, but I've never seen it baked into a foundational tenet of a denomination before.
Now, I've mentioned a couple of times that I find a lot of Calvinists will not own all of Calvinists, but to be fair, a lot of people will say flat out, I'm a 4-point Calvinist or I'm a 3-point Calvinist, meaning they do not hold to all the tenets of Calvinists, only some of them. And when I was a believer at first, I thought, well, how can you do that? How can you pick and choose which parts of the faith you want and which parts you don't want? But, really what it comes right down to it, people in almost every faith do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Bible. They pick and choose what they want to believe in the Bible. I mean, you've got people like the NIFB, and, I could go off on the NIFB, but I won't. You got people like the NIFB that say, homosexuals should be, put to death. Well, you know what? That's in the Old Testament. So if you're going to say, and believe me, I don't believe this, okay? But just bear with me a moment. You'll get my drift. If you're going to say you hold to the tenet that homosexuals should be executed, which, by the way, is not true. Dr. Josh of Digital Hammurabi talks about this on his channel. He says only certain forms of homosexuality are forbidden, not homosexuality blanket homosexuality, just certain forms of homosexuality.
Let's get back to the topic.
Well, that's where I'm going.
Okay.
The picking and choosing about Calvinism is the same picking and choosing that all Christians do about the Bible. Because if you're going to say homosexuals should be executed, then why are you wearing mixed fabrics? I mean, that's my point is, they pick and they choose, and every Christian does that.
Right. And, that's been some of the complaints against Biden from the Catholic Church. You don't believe in abortion. And I mean, you say abortion is okay, and that the Catholic Church says it's not okay. And they were talking about not excommunicating, but refusing him communion over that. And there's one priest that says it's okay to be gay, but the official position of the Catholic Church is no, it's not. And so even among the leadership, there's disagreement as to what the theology is. Okay, let's go on to the next clip. That I have is a lot of Christians say that when you get to heaven, you will not remember your loved ones from earth. And part of the reason they say this is because obviously you'll remember the loved ones that are in heaven there with you, but the ones that go to hell, that you're going to forget about these. And the reason you're going to forget about these, otherwise, how could you be happy in heaven knowing that your loved ones are being tortured for eternity in hell? Just a minute, let me finish the question. So if you do not remember your life on earth, if you do not remember the things that made you while you were on earth, how can you say that is really you that went to heaven?
Because I think that's a very elementary understanding of a human relationship between God and me, right? If God gives you even an ounce more of the knowledge that we have now about himself, you would understand why they were there and you wouldn't be unhappy about it, right? This is I think the biggest the confluence here is equating ant level understanding to of consciousness and what is to a triomni God.
Do you have children?
Yeah, I have 3 children.
Could you be happy knowing that they are burning?
If I knew why they were burning, yes. If I understood the breadth of it, how could you not?
Gosh.
You could be happy knowing your children are being
In Will's
tortured.
defense, I think
as long as you know
what Will's
why.
trying to say is, like, what Will might be trying to say is if you were, like he said, if you were given just an ounce more knowledge about God, if you reached a consciousness raising event, some phenomena occurred, and your perspective on why they were there and the suffering would be completely, that paradigm would shift completely. You wouldn't even worry about worrying about their suffering.
I think you wouldn't be able to show concern at that point. I think if you can be so heartless that an understanding of God makes you feel nothing for your children and for their suffering, that you've lost your humanity at that point.
I don't think that's what Will is saying.
That's
though.
not what I'm saying.
I think he leapt about 1,000 miles down the road from what he said.
I mean,
if
what
you're
Will's trying to say,
your perception, God, Granny, is your reality. Right, I can speak for myself, Daniel, but I really want to get this out of here. Your perception is your reality. How you perceive the world is your reality. If your perception changed, your reality changes. That's metaphysically how that works. You can't, if God were to change my perception to a point where he gave me knowledge that allowed me to understand why he was working the way he was working, I could not be upset about it.
We all do.
Oh,
Okay.
But the fact remains that not even Will, see, he's already admitted he doesn't have that. He doesn't have that next step level information either. We're just all mortals. We're just, in his words, we're ant level understanding of this. So he's admitted that. So having no knowledge, why is he taking that leap of trust? You know, without the knowledge to know if it's, help me out here. I mean, he's admitting he, like everyone else on earth, is mortal and lacks the understanding of God, why he's doing that, why he would send your kids to hell. So if he
Right.
if he's admitting that, why is, I don't see how you can justify anything without fully understanding it. How that's maybe one of the big reasons we're atheists, is because we just don't. If no one on earth would be we'd all be believers if we just had maybe that enough knowledge on the issue, right? It's being kept from us.
Exactly. And that's one of my points, is that if it's a lack of knowledge that's keeping us from understanding God, why do we have this lack of understanding? Who is the one that made us with this lack of understanding? You know, if God has made us incapable of understanding what he's doing and why he's doing, why did he make us that way? And if God has no intention of us knowing what's going on, why does he expect us to believe him and expect us to trust him without being able to have that understanding? But even if we do have that understanding, I still, my point still stands that if that is what's being demanded of us, we're being demanded to sacrifice our humanity for God.
Yeah.
I don't see how a person can be a human and have so little respect for human life.
Well, also, the unconditional election thing basically is saying, God chose me to be an atheist. How is it my fault that I'm an atheist if God chose me to be an atheist? And how is it fair that he punishes me? And I don't believe God's real, by the way, but, let's just pretend. One of my favorite things on my channel, let's pretend. How can he punish me for being an atheist when he chose for me to be an atheist? That makes no sense.
If I was a watchmaker and someone came to me and bought a watch, and as soon as they paid the money, before they even walked out the store, the watch broke, would that guy, would you expect him to come back and say and blame the watch itself, or blame me for selling it to him, the one that made it?
Mm-hmm.
No,
I don't know if that's a good analogy.
No, I'd be blaming you. No.
One of the things the Calvinists would say that God does not condemn you for not believing. God condemns you for having original sin. And that's why I say, the whole doctrine of original sin makes condemnation completely arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but okay. We're talking about original sin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about, we're paying for something, and I don't believe Adam existed, okay? But let's pretend he did. We in the 21st century are paying for something that our great whatever did, in the past, and if we bring it up to the 21st century, we look at North Korea, and North Korea has this generational prison thing where, if your grandpa offends Kim Jong-un or whatever his name is, then your grandpa not only goes to prison, but your dad goes to prison and you go to prison. So we condemn North Korea for that, but God's doing the exact same thing, except on a more massive scale.
Mhm. In response to Gio's question, how can anyone have a relationship with a timeless, spaceless, immaterial being? That was one of the things that Will said that did surprise me a little, because it had never come up in any of the Calvinist churches that I attended. Was Will said you don't. He said that the relationship you have with God is not like a personal relationship, which is completely contrary to what I've always heard taught in churches. His point was that the relationship between a person and God is more like a patron relationship, where God is your patron. He's supporting you and he's providing salvation for you, and your responsibility is to love and worship him as patron.
I'd like to respond to Mr. Shadow Kitty. He says the watch wasn't, in my analogy, the watch wasn't intelligently designed. It absolutely was. It wasn't divinely intelligently designed, but it was divine. It was intelligently designed. And I don't know if there's a distinction there, or if my analogy wasn't good, but it wasn't. I'm not into divine intelligence, but it was intelligently designed. So
I think he was making a joke, because he did have that laughing cat behind it.
Oh yeah, okay. No,
Yeah,
sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Lone Wanderer, we haven't heard much from you tonight. Do you have any opinions to share?
Other than the fact that that man's a swine for telling people that he would be cool with his kids being burned alive. What an awful man, honestly.
I try very hard to steal, man, and be gracious. And theists a lot of theists that are apprehensive about coming on atheist shows will choose to come on mine and others like mine, because they know they're going to get a fair shake, and it's very amicable. So I try to keep that going. In the back of my mind, I was thinking the same thing, but I don't know if you can, based on what he said, if his knowledge level was raised to a point, maybe there would be I could hypothetically see, okay, you're dead, you're in heaven, you're in the presence of God. He bumps up your knowledge level enough to where maybe there is a possibility that you could justify seeing your kids burning. But based on our current understanding, yeah, it's sickening.
One of the things that I was thinking about is I sure hope his kids don't see that. Because imagine watching that and hearing your dad say, yeah, I'm okay with you burning forever. And thinking, that's all you think of me, Dad?
I know, that's terrible. That's awful. It wouldn't surprise me if he's one of those quiverful people who just has children for the sake of it because of some biblical passage.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, I could probably have people like him on the show, and I would probably hold my tongue, but yeah, he wasn't on my show, so I'm going to say what I thought. But I feel like with Calvinism, it's like, when you have that girlfriend or boyfriend that says, oh, don't buy me a present, it's okay, it's fine, and then you don't buy the present, they're like, why didn't you buy me a present? In terms of like, you're like, you're already damned. So, don't even, well, you should strive for it, but you don't know if you're damned or not until you die. It's like, it boggles my mind. I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't last 5 minutes.
One thing that nobody knew was going on except for me and Jim was I was watching how Jim and Scott were treating the guests, and I was thinking, oh, I might be getting a bit too aggressive. So I sent Jim a DM on Twitter saying, am I getting too aggressive? Should I be more polite? Jim said, no, go for it.
No, that's our show. Any guests we invite. We had a 6-person, it was in studio, 6 people literally at this table, 3 atheists, 3 Christians, and 1 was Aaron Ra. And the 3 theists knew Aaron was coming. It was not a surprise. And the only time in the history of this show where we left the recording studio, someone left the recording studio without shaking my hand. He didn't like the way Aaron was coming off, even though everyone and their uncle knows how Aaron is. And he got offended and he stormed out. And I want that to be the first and last time that ever happens. But really, in my defense, as the host, I let them know he was coming. Everyone knows how Aaron is. You know, we all have different types of personalities. There's the Anthony Magnaboscos, and there's the Aaron Raz, and there's everything in between.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, I'm trying to get more theists on my show, and I think the only way I can do that is if I can show them a more kinder, gentler approach.
When I prefer one-on-one interviews. So when I have theists on my show, I generally try to respect them. It doesn't mean I respect their beliefs, but you have to separate the person from their beliefs. And I think a lot of theists can't do that. You know, I mean, if you get offended because I'm telling it like it is about, you know, your faith, you know, that I'm telling the truth about your faith, if you get offended, that is not my problem. I've said this before on my channel. That is not my problem. That's your problem, because you cannot separate yourself from your faith.
Wildcard 120 makes a really good point here. He says his statement about his kids and hearing about the justification of slavery is indicative of how religion makes people smash their own moral compass. And this is a point that I've tried to make to theists a number of times when they say anything that God does is right just because God did it. And well, how do you come to that conclusion? How do you make that determination if you have no ability to decide that anything is right or wrong? How can you determine that what everything God does is right?
Ox said, "Keep feeding their egos, and they won't ever go away." I kind of understand what you're saying there. If it does feed their ego, that's a byproduct. I'm not trying to feed their ego. Keeping it amicable does not mean that I'm going to agree with them to their face. I'll attack their ideology till the cows come home. I'm just going to treat them like a person. I'm going to do my best to steel man. It's different, and you know that's different. You'll see on if you watch our show at all. We tear their ideas apart. That's fair game. So it's two separate things here.
Mm-hmm.
And if you guys remember the whole Steve McCrae, Kyle Curtis thing, I don't want to go off into any drama, but I had Kyle Curtis on, and I made a point of at least 3, probably 4 times throughout the interview. I let him know, I think what you did was wrong. You have some explaining to do. You need to make a atonement for what you did, restitution. I made it very clear at least 3 or 4 times throughout the entire, whatever is it, 2-hour interview. But the fact that I was so nice to him, that's why everyone came down on me. Why are you being so nice to this criminal? I wasn't. I made it clear. If I was too amicable, well, I apologize for it. No, I don't apologize for that.
Okay, let's look at the next clip.
Sorry,
Yeah, what I wanted to add was, you know, Caesar is talking about people having a choice in the matter, that people choose to sin, but the Calvinist position is that people have no choice, that God made the choice before creation, and he chose to save some. And those that were chosen, those are the elect, those are the called, and only the chosen can come. And when Jesus came to die, he died only for the chosen. And this is the point of theology that eventually broke my faith, because it's a nice doctrine when you think about, oh, wow, I'm one of the chosen. God died for me, and isn't that great for me? But when you reverse that and look at the other side of that, that also means that God chose to damn the majority of humanity before he even created them. And he created them for the purpose of making them his vessels of wrath for damnation. And to me, that is just about the most appalling God you could possibly have.
Yeah, I would agree, Granny.
Let's check in with our resident Calvinist. I saw your hand was up anyway, Will.
Yeah.
What do you have to say on it?
I mean, so the original topic, original sin. So for from the Reformed theological perspective, original sin is simply the first sin. So before Adam, there was no sin. Creation was perfect and whole. And after the fall, sin entered the world. So therefore, death enters the world. And the ability for man to sin began. So because of that now, every human being's default nature is to sin based on that curse. So not only was mankind cursed, but all of creation was cursed. So the birds of the field, all the different aspects of it.
But when did the fall occur? At the moment of Adam and Eve eating the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, or prior to that?
At that point.
But God had planned
Okay.
for that fall long before that point, before
Sure.
the creation of the world.
Sure. It was
And
part
so-
of his dual will. Yeah.
Exactly. And so sin was God's will.
Yeah. If God is an omnipotent being, or a triomni God, if a triomni God exists, then he could not have not known. Sin could not exist if he did not predestine for it to exist.
And so God has willed for and predestined the vast majority of humanity to eternal damnation before he even created them.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't believe
impossible-
that's what the Bible teaches, though, Granny.
I would disagree with Caesar, and if we could go into the whole book of Romans 8 and chapter 8, chapter 9, for example. But just from simply, it's not even about the text itself. It's even about the logical possibility, right? If God is a triomni being who sees all of time at once, so future, past, present, all at the same time, if he's outside time and space, he could not have predestined those people to because he's seeing them all at once, all at one time, in all things, right? If God is that God, if that's the God that we worship, he
What
could
does it
not
mean?
have predestined them. Yeah, for us, I personally believe this sin is simply disobedience to God, just disobeying God. That's all.
Okay. Some of these clips are out of order because there were some that I wanted to make sure that we got to. And so that one was actually earlier than the other two that we saw.
I don't want to hog the conversation if Lone Wanderer has anything. I've got something that just occurred to me, though.
No, you go ahead. It'll just be me raging about him.
Well, it just occurred to me just now that, okay, the four of us sitting here, all right? So if we were Calvinists, some of us might be chosen and some are not chosen, right? We have no way of knowing in advance, correct? Okay, let's say I'm one of the non-chosen ones, but I have no way of knowing. So all four of us are going to live our lives hopeful, fingers crossed, right? And the analogy, forgive me, it's the one that popped in my head. It's the kind of disturbing graphic, but imagine a wounded mouse and a cat is just playing with it, right? And the cat's God and we're the wounded mouse. And the cat knows I'm about to eat this. I'm about to finish him off. The mouse has no idea. He's going through life in suffering on earth, but he's hopeful. He's hopeful he's going to get away. And how teasing is God? Me, I don't know it, but I'm one of the unchosen, but I'm going to live my life. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope I'm chosen, but it's all for naught. And he's just playing with me like I'm wounded and he's going to eat me anyway.
It's utter cruelty is what it is.
Yeah.
I asked my pastor that very question about 15 years ago. And the answer that I was given was that it won't happen. That if you love God and you serve God, then you're chosen. You know, God wouldn't not choose you if because you wouldn't have come to him and wanted to love him and serve him if you weren't one of the chosen. What I would love to see is what he thinks of me now. If he would go, oh, you were right. You were never chosen in the first place. You
Oh,
wasted
gosh.
42 years of your life.
No, he's just trying to save you. Come back. Come back.
That is a circular argument
Mhm.
because, I mean, if you really love God, you're chosen. And if you're chosen, you really love God. I mean, that's basically the argument, which is totally circular reasoning.
Well, I actually go for the opposite argument with most Calvinists because they always tell me that I was never a Christian. And I say, okay, if I was never a Christian, how do you know you are?
Oh, yep.
You're not going to know until the day you die whether you held on to your faith to the day you die.
So if you're not chosen, it's impossible for you to give yourself over to Christ and do and believe everything that you. A non-chosen person just naturally wouldn't do that. There's not
Right.
one out of 8 billion people on the planet, not one, just going through the motions and not chosen, but doing everything that he or she thinks that, is right, believing everything you're supposed to, but they're still not going to get in. That's impossible.
Well, okay, you threw in one other thing there, which is going through the motions, and they would agree that there are some people that are just going through the motions, that they don't really adhere to the faith. But I did. I mean, I wholeheartedly believed every word of it. I was in church every time the doors were open because I loved it.
Well, let's say there's another person just like you, but didn't deconvert. And they lived, they
Right.
kept on.
Oh, okay. And could they have been not chosen?
Yes.
That is a great question. I know that the Calvinists would say, no, that's not possible because they wouldn't have felt that love of God if they hadn't been called.
Well, I know that's BS because I was going to church to please someone else.
I was a true blue believer, but I mean, if you're going to argue on feelings, that's not really a valid argument.
No, it really isn't a feelings argument.
Well, I can disprove that immediately. Kelly, you really felt God. You loved God for 32 years.
42. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that theory's out of the water.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
I know.
I loved and served God most of my life before I, found out it was all crap, But my point is, it, I don't know, it's kind of hard to put into words, but for somebody to say to me as a now atheist that I was never a Christian, first of all, that is very narcissistic of them because they are telling me that they know me better than I know myself, which is total bull crap.
Yes, it is.
Total bull crap. And I don't know what else to say to them. I mean, I was totally drinking the Kool-Aid, and yeah, I know it wasn't Kool-Aid; it was Flavor Aid, but that's neither here nor there. But I mean, I was totally drinking the Kool-Aid. I was going to church every time the doors were open. I even went to private school from 4th grade to 8th grade. Okay, so I was in church even when I was in school, because it was two private Christian schools, actually, and then on top of that, I would do mission trips in the summer. So, I mean, come on. Are you really going to tell me I never believed? Are you really going to tell me that I did all that crap and I never really believed? No, you're not going to tell me that.
Yeah, and see, I'm the opposite because I did all of that crap and I still didn't believe. I was just doing it to please other people. Because it was easier than an argument every Sunday or when anything else came up. And I was very mad at myself for a long time afterwards for doing that. Because it made me so depressed. And eventually I had to tell that person, I'm like, look, I'm really not a Christian. I was just going along with this because I wanted to make you happy, but really I'm hurting myself. Yeah.
Yeah, Robin had some issues with that for a bit, because I put all my kids through Christian schools, and Robin deconverted with about a year to a year and a half left to school, and I found out that Robin no longer believed about 6 to 8 months before Robin graduated, and I considered the possibility of moving Robin to the public school, but I really didn't want to move Robin to a different school in the middle of his senior year. That was one reason, and there was another reason why I really didn't want to move Robin, and that is this was all in the closet until graduation day, which was 2 years ago, so it can come out now. But Robin's closest friend was transgender. And this friend's parents knew that he was transgender, but nobody at the school did. And he had to keep this a secret because he would have been expelled from school if anyone found out that he was transgender. Robin was worried about being expelled for being an atheist. I don't think they would have expelled Robin for being an atheist, but they might have. And so Robin was very careful, especially in Bible class, what he said. Although he often tells the story of the one time that he slipped when they mentioned the red tent. Is everyone familiar with the red tent?
Yes. That's where they send you when you have your period.
Yes.
Away from everybody else, so you don't contaminate.
Right. In the Old Testament, women were unclean while they were on their period, so they had to go outside the city and live in the red tent for a week. And Robin let it slip and went, "That is so stupid." And everyone looked at Robin like, "Oh, how dare you call the Bible stupid?"
Oh, that's brilliant. See, I used to try to get away with that one when I was a religious studies major. I'm like, in Islam, I don't have to cook or clean for a week if I have my period. I'm like, I'm like, no, I couldn't do it. But it was tempting,
And SJ is in the chat. Welcome, SJ.
Yeah, I
SJ
noticed
says
that.
it sounds works based. Here we've got another theist saying, "Oh, you guys were never real believers."
Well, I know I was never a real believer. I've never denied that.
Yeah.
When I knew where stories came from, I knew it was a story. Like, I was the one asking my mom when my granddad died. I said, "If heaven's so great, why isn't he calling us and saying it's so great, do all the right things? You don't want to go to hell." And I learned, like Ricky Gervais says, through body language that it was BS.
And Skitscratcher, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
What is SJ on about works-based? Is she talking about our analysis or the Calvinist ideology?
I believe that SJ is saying that the description that we are giving of our faith is that we had a works-based faith. And it possibly is because of the things that Lone Wanderer was saying. I'm not sure.
Sure, blame me.
Well, only because you said you never really believed it.
No,
even though Lisa,
okay.
Lisa, Jim, and I all really believed it.
No, I'm a cradle atheist. I'm with Lone Wanderer. I've never believed nor prayed ever in my life.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were used to be a believer.
Nope. Cradle atheist. But yeah, I doubt SJ can make the same claim about you or Lisa. There's no way. I mean, it's evident that it wasn't solely works based. You felt it in your heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is the exact problem with basing this stuff on feelings, because I'll go ahead and tell you, I have temporal lobe epilepsy, and I've had God experiences, and I still have God experiences, but I know it's just my brain tricking me, I mean, come on, it's not that hard to figure out. I was a psychology major, so it's not that hard to figure out when you've got all of this background in, psychology. It's not that hard to figure out your brain's tricking you. And that's exactly what happened with me. And also, one thing people don't understand is God is a drug. Seriously, people get high on God. You can see this in the Pentecostal churches.
Mhm.
He is a drug. You don't have to take substances to get high. You can get high all on your own because your neurochemicals do that. You know, you don't have to have a drug.
When Leonard Cohen sings Hallelujah, I admit I feel something, and I bet you it's something close to what people when they're in church whooping and hollering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Here's the catch-22 that I get from believers is if you tell them all the things that you felt as a believer, they say, "Oh, well, you never really believed it. It was just feelings." And if you tell them all the, and I'm sorry, and then they say you never really did anything in obedience to God. And then if you tell them everything that you did, they say, "Well, that was just works based. You never really believed it." No matter what I say, you're going to tell me I was never a real believer. So it really doesn't make much difference what I say. And SJ, I'm not directing that at you. Because I get that from a lot of believers and far more from other people than you. So don't take that as an attack on what you said, because that was not my intention. But I do get that from a lot of believers.
Well, I mean, you can't really blame them because that's what they were taught. But at some point, you got to say, you got to start thinking for yourself, And if you don't start thinking for yourself, that's when you become, if you know something and you still want to believe something, you still want to have the blinders on, then that's when you become culpable. I mean, I don't know. I'm honest. I'm honest on my channel. I'm honest, with everybody. At that point, when you know something, when you know it's all crap, but you choose to have the blinders on, that is when you are culpable. And some Christians never get to the point where they're culpable. And I totally understand that. But there are a lot of Christians that do get to that point where they're culpable. And it's just really frustrating.
Yeah. I would just say I agree with Ian's comment there, because faith is supposed to be an individual thing between you and God. So how are you going to know how I feel? Yeah.
And that's true. Our brains are a virtual pharmacy. There are so many studies out there. I wish I could queue one up right now, but where they compare through brain scans religious experiences with taking high doses of maybe serotonin. I don't know, but it just totally matches.
Have you seen the study of the God box?
Oh, I saw a video on it. They're in another room. They hook you up and tell me about it. I remember seeing something.
So they hook you up to, like, they put a head on you. It looks like a box. You're inside of a little room, and then they will. I don't know if they gave them anything, but they basically try to re-simulate religious experiences and see what happens in the brain. And the brain was going all different kinds of colors. It was really interesting.
They do transmagnetic stimulation, basically.
Thank you.
What it is.
Yeah.
And what's that drug, DMT? I think there's a documentary about it on Netflix, the God drug or something, and it totally recreates that same euphoria.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to bring up. Let's see. Somebody made, there it is. There we go.
It's good. You made that right after the show, I bet you.
No, Lone Wanderer made this while we were doing the show here.
I did. I was like, I'm going to clip that. That face is priceless. I think I'm going to make an entire series of Granny Says What?
I don't want to demean my guests, and I don't believe I am doing so by saying this, but later in another group chat, atheist only group chat, I made a comment that up until that night, the worst I've ever seen someone just get their butts handed to them in a debate was actually the theist one. John Mark Reynolds, I saw him live when he came to Fort Worth, and he was debating Michael Shermer, and that was the worst intellectual ass whipping I've ever seen until that night. What Granny did to him, I almost felt sorry for him at the end.
I was a little surprised at your comment because I thought, oh gosh, was I that?
But you were attacking ideas, though. I mean, you were kind. Fair game.
Yeah.
Okay. And SJ, yes, I realize you are not a Calvinist. I know that you are a Molinist.
What the heck is a
Okay,
Molinist again?
I've never heard that term.
Molinist?
Are they people who like moles?
It's an entire theology. We could do a different stream on Molinism
Because
if
moles
you like.
need love too.
Yeah.
And the opposite of Calvinist is Arminianist. That's where we have total free will. It seems more logical to me. Total free will. You choose if you're going to believe or not, and the door is open to heaven. It seems more logical, if anything can be more logical in this sense.
I really enjoyed speaking with Caesar on the show, and I've tried to get in touch, and I need you to give me something to get in touch with him, because I tried to get in touch with him and I forgot to give him my email address in the little thing that I sent him. I ran out of characters and hit send and realized, oh shoot, I didn't give him a way to contact me.
I'll send it to you right now while I'm thinking about it.
Okay. But yeah, I really enjoyed Caesar, and I thought he had a much more reasonable theology than anything I've ever heard from from most other theists.
It was too gracious almost. If every Christian was like him, I might not even have a channel. That was just, if every Christian believed like he did, I might not even have a channel. I mean, that, even though it's still ridiculous, but it's so inclusive and open and I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I probably would have deconverted if I had seen Christianity in that light.
Yeah, he's definitely a class act. Whether or not his theology is sound, you did see him arguing with everybody else. And the other theists were like, nah, that's not quite right.
Yeah, and I have a question on that as a segue to you, Granny. When you say that you lost your faith, was it like a light bulb moment, or was it just a series of things looking back that you slowly realized but didn't realize until that one thing that broke the camel's back? Or
it was, although when it first happened, all I saw was the straw that broke the camel's back. And so if you watch my first video that I ever put out, which is why I walked away from 42 years of faith, I talk about the straw that broke the camel's back. But in having conversations, particularly conversations with other former believers, and they start talking about their experiences, I began to realize a lot of other things that came before that were factors. And one of them I identified in one of the clips that we watched tonight, when I said that the point of theology that began to turn me away, that is not included in that original video because that came to me later, but that came about a year or 2 years before I deconverted. But it was the realization that if God has chosen to save some, he's chosen to damn most. That is what started to break my theology. But I was still a theist at that point, and that's why I did not recognize that in the beginning as the beginning of my path to atheism, but it was.
Maybe you should make an updated video.
I thought about it, but I've done so many things where I've talked about other aspects that I kind of think that maybe I already have, although maybe you're right. Maybe I should do that. That'd be an easy video to make.
Yeah.
I've talked about my deconversion twice, and a lot of theists think, especially Christians, they think, either they think you never were a Christian to begin with, which is an absolute straw man, like I said, or they believe it's like a light switch, like you go to bed a Christian and you wake up an atheist. And that's just not true. At least it wasn't for me. Because, I mean, when I realized, and I had to realize this, it wasn't like all at once. But when I realized I had lost my faith, I literally cried. I literally cried. And I don't think that Christians understand that when atheists go through the deconversion process, at least me, I can't speak for other atheists who used to be Christians or even theists, but at least for me, when I realized I had lost my faith, I felt like I'd lost something, you know? And I mean, I cried my eyes out. And I don't think that's something that theists in general and particularly Christians understand. It's not an easy thing.
I did not have that same experience. However, I wouldn't say I'm emotionally dead, but I'm not that far from it. And I have been since 1984. I lost my first child. And after that, my emotions have never been the same since. And I can do a lot without having a lot of reaction to it.
Yeah.
And that's why, Jim, I sent that message to you, because a lot of times when I am in a show, I'm watching the other guests for what are my emotions supposed to be? I don't know how I'm supposed to feel here.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a lot of feelings.
I'm so sorry that happened to you. You've told the story about everything that happened before, so we won't bring it up, but suffice to say it was very traumatic from what you told me. And that army doctor should have had their license taken away, but anyway. Sorry.
That's okay.
On the long list of traumatic experiences, what I went through in Iraq, it's maybe in the top 5, but losing your offspring is number 1. It is the one that will numb you.
I'm sorry you went through that, Granny.
Thank you. Thank you. I did go on to have 3 other children, and children don't replace other children. And some people get that and some people don't. But I did take great joy in my children, especially Robin, my youngest. I am so close to Robin. One thing that's funny is there's a 12-year gap between Robin and Robin's next sibling. And a lot of people, when I was saying, I'm thinking about having another child, everyone was saying, no, don't do it. Don't do it. You're too old. You're too old. And I'd go back and I tell those people now, that is the best decision I have ever made in my life. Of all my kids, I'm closest to Robin. And I was 40 when Robin was born. We are getting
clips.
Well, I have plenty more clips, but we're getting close to time. Do you want to do one more, or do you want to wrap it up?
It's your show, Kelly. I'm down for it.
I feel like this is a good place to wrap up because we kind of segued out of Calvinism.
Yeah. Let's go.
Oh, I do have one saved round. I'll touch on it real quick.
Go ahead.
At the top of the show, near the top of the show, you said God needs sinners to display His justice, and and it just occurred to me that you've got this power and you need to show it off. And I equate it to United States has this nuclear arsenal and we have enemies. We have our enemies because we need to display our nuclear arsenal or our military strength. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's all I had to say on that.
The first time that was explained to me, I felt that, my gosh, this God is narcissistic. Of course, you can't say that. But I did make that question as polite as I could to my pastor, isn't that kind of selfish? And the response was, well, it is, but it's okay for God to be selfish because everything is about God. The whole universe is about God. This is His universe. Everything is for His glory. That's the only thing that matters. So,
And that original chat with those theists the other night, it did devolve into the divine command theory, if you remember, that no matter what God does, if you think it's bad, it's God did it, so it automatically becomes okay. It's
mhm.
yeah. And so many shows
Yeah.
devolve into, if they don't have, they'll say one of three things. They'll devolve into the DCT, divine command theory, or they'll just say you got to have faith, or, it's a cop out technique.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, so you're saying that we have more morality than your God. Basically, that's what they're saying. I don't care about divine command theory. I don't care if they say, well, he's God and whatever he does is right. No, that is not true. Not even if he existed, which I don't believe he does. If any kind of a God exists, I'm willing to leave the door open for a deistic God, or like like a Greek or a Roman type God. I'm willing to leave that door open, but the Christian God does not exist. And when I'm leaving the door open for a deistic God or a Greek-like or Roman-like God, that's because those gods are basically unfalsifiable. I mean, a deistic God is basically, okay, he created the world and now he doesn't have anything to do with it. He just lets it go. Well, how are you going to falsify that?
And Harmonica Man's comment about that's childish is what it is. This is not a comment to you, Lisa. This was a comment to my saying that that everything is about God and everything revolves around God. Just wanted to point that out.
Oh, that's okay. I know Harmonica Man. He's cool.
Yes, he is. Harmonica Man is cool. Lone Wanderer, did you have any final thoughts before we close up?
Oh, I have so many to continue. We need to continue this discussion. That's my final thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, religion bad, atheism good. No, believe what you want to believe, but understand that there are a lot of people out here like Granny and Atheist Edge and Lisa and myself who would be happy to talk to you. We don't aim to deconvert people, but we'd be happy to talk to you if you're looking to get out.
Yes. Yes. Because some people do have some serious struggles with family and with friends. I had a divided family before I deconverted. My family was about half and half. So I just moved from one half of the family to the other half.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and close up, and I'm going to let everyone shill for whatever they might have coming up, and then we'll go ahead and close. So, Lone Wanderer, let us know what you have coming up on your channel.
I don't have anything coming up on the channel as yet, but as soon as I get my new digital camera, which I'm looking to get a 4K one, then I'm going to start a series of my cosplay live from Bunker 227.
Okay.
I've been learning a lot of video editing and figured out how to put myself in a shot in 2 different ways so I can play multiple characters.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
But other than that, it's pretty quiet. I may get back to the Word of the Day series that I had, but I just felt like it ran its course, for me. So, yeah. Other than that, I'll be in all of your DMs and watching everybody's shows.
Very good. Lisa, what do you have coming up on your channel?
Well, I was taking a break from my edited videos. I just, needed a break. But I am working on another episode of the Connecticut witch trials. So that's coming up. Also, usually I do Saturday live streams on Saturday at 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and Atheist Church on Sunday Pacific Daylight Time. And I usually do those. The only time I won't do those is like if it is ungodly hot, because every once in a while it does get very hot here. Or when I have a migraine that I just can't struggle through. So, those are the only times that I will cancel either Saturday live stream or Atheist Church. So
Did you say Connecticut witch trials?
that is correct.
Hmm.
They were 50 years before the Salem witch trials.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, not a lot of people know about it because Salem was so bad.
I'm related to Ann Putnam.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Well,
if you
no.
go look at our family graveyard, there are a lot of Putnams there.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a conversation we can have.
Yeah, actually, the Connecticut witch trials were worse, but a lot of people don't know about it because the courthouse burned down. And when the courthouse
records
burned
burned
down,
Yeah.
the records burned up too. So,
Mhm.
Historians had to piece it together from like family Bibles and people's journals and stuff like that. So,
Mhm.
that's why not a whole lot of people know about the Connecticut witch trials, but they were the first witch trials in colonial America.
Interesting. Jim, what do you have coming up on your channel?
Oh, that sounds really interesting. I never knew about that. I know the Salem witch trials, only 20 were actually executed, 19 by hanging, and one was crushed with a rock, and there were some men in there. It wasn't all women. I don't know anything about Connecticut witch trials. That I'm going to catch that. So I'm right in the middle of a very dry, boring, dull series, but it's like eating a bowl of oatmeal with nothing in it. It's good for you. You need to see this series. It's getting 0 views. It's getting hardly any views, but it's one of those series that you need to watch if you're a non-believer. I promise you the next series will be the dessert, but yeah, it's dry, boring. It's my journey through that month-long critical thinking course. So there's a lot of math and statistics and Latin, and I get it. It's dry and boring, but I think people need to see it.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I turned on one of them earlier today, and I will admit I got bored and I went off and did something else. I probably need to take it in smaller segments.
Or you know what? I got a comment. Someone says they fall asleep to it, which I could totally see. And if there's anything to be said I fall asleep to Kenneth Humphreys, Jesus Never Existed videos, and Truth Surge, the excavating the empty tomb. It's a 37-part series.
Wow.
But it's awesome, and it's great for falling asleep too. He's just got that mellow voice, and I don't know. There might be something to what you learn while you're asleep, your subconscious. I've heard about people waking up and they know a little more whatever foreign language they were learning before. I don't know if there's anything to that.
That makes sense. And what I have coming up, I am working on a response to Matt Powell. He has thrown down the gauntlet saying that he has the ultimate challenge that atheists cannot answer with regards to evolution.
Ooh, what is
Of
it?
course. Genetic drift.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Good night.
I just have to say this about Matt Powell, and then I'll shut up so we can go. He made such a stupid video that he deleted it because it was so stupid. The argument was basically, if there are African Americans, why are there still Africans or something like that?
I am
What?
including a portion of that video in this video. Yep.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yep. And the soldiers during the Civil War that were hunting for pterodactyls.
Oh, that sounds like something John Morris Pendleton would say.
I don't know. Well, anyway. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Thank you to everyone in the chat. It's been wonderful having all of you, and live your life. Bye.
Bye.